Yes, good morning members, and Happy New Year. I trust we had a good New Year, and the old phrase was, if you can remember it, then it wasn't a good year, but you know what I mean. Anyway, welcome. We've got some nice weather today, a fair amount to get through. Just a few brief words from me by way of introduction before I ask Leah to take us through it. It's particularly important, today's briefing, bearing in mind that we've been in 3 lockdowns, and we're obviously operating with national and local restrictions and trying to maintain democracy in a virtual world of remote meetings. So that makes life difficult, but certainly the information before us now is that elections will take place in May, and clearly there are some consequences should that change, but perhaps members will have questions going forward. So with that in mind, for May, we must prepare and press on to meet the election timetable. The pre-election period for Cornwall Council will commence on the 22nd of March this year, and will end the close of polls on the 6th of May. This is a period of heightened sensitivity where additional restrictions are placed on what a council may publish. So Leah is here to provide a 20-minute presentation to refresh members on the key points applicable during this period. That's all I wanted to say by way of introduction. If members have questions, could I ask them to put a cross in the box rather than the hands up? Then at least I have a better idea of the order in which to ask members to put their questions. So that's all from me, members. So I'll ask Leah to do her presentation.
Mike, I was just going to say a few words, if that's okay. I just said to Leah, sorry, Leah, I'm going to have to butt in.
Please do. Okay.
Enjoy your virtual meeting.
Members and officers working. I like it, yes.
Oh, bless. So good morning, everyone. So as you can probably imagine, we are preparing for an election. So the election is prominent in our minds. And one of the issues that can be an issues of contention or uncertainty around is in relation to the what we call the pre-election period, often referred to as PERDA. So I just want to outline today that we're going to outline to you today the law and the guidance and around that application of that to you today. So I am going to apologise. We are going to be a little bit legalistic today, but that's where we get our source from in terms of how we advise you. Happy to take any questions at the end of the presentation, and I will hand you over to Leah Musto-Shinton, which I'm not sure if all members have met Leah, but she's our senior governance lawyer within legal services. So I'll hand over to Leah to take you through the presentation this morning.
Thanks, Mel. Okay, Leah, over to you.
Good afternoon, members, and Happy New Year. I'll just share my screen with you. It's just loading now.
This is where you have to do that kind of comedy act, Mike, where you keep it going until we can get the technology sorted.
I thought members just did the policy. We leave it to officers to do the work, don't we, Mel? So
yeah, and look at that as Mike, as if by magic it's loading up.
Oh, fantastic, first class. Okay, Leah.
Can all members see those slides?
Yes.
Great.
Yep.
So as Mel has already introduced me, I'm Leah Musto-Shinton. I'm the Senior Corporate Governance Lawyer for Cornwall Council. I've been asked today to give a brief presentation on the pre-election period, and specifically in relation to the local elections which will be taking place in May this year. So what I'm going to be covering during this presentation is what the pre-election period is, when it is, the applicable law and guidance, what it means for us in practice, so what a council should and should not do during the pre-election period and what that means for members. I'm going to touch briefly on officer involvement in elections, and then I'm going to leave you with some useful links to the legislation and the guidance, and I'm going to provide you with a contact point for pre-election period queries. So just starting with what is the pre-election period. So the pre-election period, as Mel has already referenced, is referred to as many things. It's often referred to as PERDA, or as the period of heightened sensitivity, and it's effectively a time of heightened sensitivity in respect of publicity and other matters covering the period between the notice of an election, which, as we've already said, for Cornwall Council will be the 22nd of March, to the close of polls on election day, which is obviously on the 6th of May this year. It affects officers who must be politically impartial and publications in the council's name. And at a basic level, it prevents the council and its officers from publicising any new or controversial initiatives that might be considered advantageous to a particular candidate standing for election or their parties. So I wanted to cover here as well is what the purpose of a pre-election period is. And basically the purpose of a pre-election period is to protect the electoral process from interference, intended or accidental, by those holding public office. So that is the main purpose of a pre-election period. So we've covered this already, but just to reiterate, the pre-election period for us, we will be issuing our notice of election on the 22nd of March. So that is when it will start for Cornwall Council. I think the latest date you can do that this year is the 29th of March. So we are doing that a week early, and it will end at the close of polls on the 6th of May. So as Mal said, we would be covering the applicable legislation. So the applicable legislation to this is Section 2 of the Local Government Act 1986. And basically that prohibits the publication by councils of material which in whole or in part appears to be designed to affect public support for a political party. And subsection 2 of that section, it makes clear that the timing and circumstances of publication are relevant factors in determining whether any publication falls within the above prohibition. Section 4 of that Act empowers the Secretary of State to issue codes of practice, which we must have regard to. The current Code of Recommended Practice on Local Authority Publicity is the 2011 Code. And Section 6 of the Act defines publicity as any communication in whatever form addressed to the public at large or a section of the public. So it's a very, very wide definition. And just pointing out that those prohibitions, so the legislation I've just covered there, is applicable all of the time, not just during the pre-election period, but the pre-election period is a period of heightened sensitivity. So during that time, we've not only got to comply with that law, but we've got to take extra care to make sure that we do so. So just continuing on with that point, in particular consideration must be given to publicity or materials that would not be controversial but for an upcoming election. So some things may be absolutely fine during a period outside of the pre-election period, but on a run up to an election, there may be different connotations attached to that same publication. So it's just that additional level of sense check that you need to have. Just picking up there on some central government guidance, which was issued for the general election last year, which just picks up on this point and just says special care must be taken during the course of an election, since material produced with complete impartiality, which would be accepted as objective in ordinary times, may generate criticism during an election period. So it's just picking up on that point there. So as I've said, the relevant code at the moment is the 2011 code, and that code sets out a range of principles that the local authority must always comply with in its communications, and the principle which is of most application for this presentation is the one I've highlighted in bold at the end there. And that is any communications are issued with care during periods of heightened sensitivity, such as the pre-election period. So picking up on some of the detail within the code, and there is other guidance as well. One of the main guidance out there, which I refer to in the header of this slide, is the Local Government Association Guide on Publicity during a pre-election period, just picking up on some things that a council should not do during a pre-election period. So here we've got issue any publicity which seeks to influence voters, hosting third-party material or public forums, publish any publicity on controversial issues or report views on proposals in a way which identifies them with candidates or parties in an election, publish any publicity relating to individuals involved in the election, arrange media events involving members, provide council photographs or other materials to members or political group staff, unless it's been verified that they will not be used for campaigning purposes, and to not assist with national political visits. So here I've covered what does that mean for members. So members can still issue their own political publicity under the usual electoral rules. That could include Facebook, any social media platforms, but they just should not seek officer assistance and should not use council facilities to do so. Candidates standing for office, including members seeking re-election, may not use council photographs in their election material. Members may not make party political calls on council telephones or use their council email for party political purposes. But they are able to use public parts of council premises, even if it's intended to use it as a photo opportunity, just so long as it's not organised or funded from council resources and council equipment and officers are not involved. So here I've just covered a couple of things. So we've talked about what is PERDA. It's a period of heightened sensitivity. During that period of heightened sensitivity, you always do that additional sense check. So there are some things that a council should think carefully before they do them during a period of heightened sensitivity. I've highlighted a couple of them here. One of those is issuing any new consultations, unless it's a statutory duty or normal council business. That should say, or a non-controversial issue, where the benefits of proceeding outweigh the benefits of postponing. Publishing council initiative material, unless the campaign was already running, or as I said above, is non-controversial. But it's important to note that these restrictions do not amount to a complete prohibition on publications or publicity by a council during the pre-election period. So there was a central government case actually, which highlights this point, and that was the case of Client Earth and the Secretary of State for Environment, and that was a 2017 case. And basically in that case, central government sought to argue that they wanted to delay publishing their air quality plan due to the PERDA period. And the court rejected this, and they rejected the government's arguments and ordered publication of that plan. And I really liked the judge's sort of thinking in this case, and it it just resounded with me when thinking about what is a pre-election period, and he provided a really useful summary. And basically he said, in order for business to be conducted during PERDA, it must be business as usual, and or it must be uncontroversial, and or there must be good reasons or exceptional circumstances such as urgency. So in this particular case, the court found that there were exceptional circumstances and urgency, and that it was in the public interest for this plan to be published even during the PERDA period. I think sort of other examples there of a business as usual consultation, so our budget consultations and other statutory consultations that the local authority is obliged to continue with, they would go ahead during a pre-election period. Just drawing on advice I've given for the upcoming elections, there will be a consultation going out which will cross over very slightly with the pre-election period, and that's on the climate change DPD. So just highlighting there how the business of the local authority does still continue during the PERDA period. And that moves us nicely on to things a council can do. So it can publish factual information which identifies the names, wards and parties of candidates standing in an election. And just picking up on the points I've just made, the starting point is that the business of the council continues to be transacted. So we continue the business of the council, and that includes holding of meetings and the making of decisions. That is with the caveat of the additional sense check I've talked about. So whether you should conduct that business during the PERDA period, addressing the points raised by the judge in that case, I've just highlighted for you. So is it business as usual? Is it uncontroversial? Are there good reasons or exceptional circumstances such as urgency? Relevant to the point with continuing with the business of the council is the council resolution that we made on the 22nd of September last year, where it was decided that during the pre-election period, quasi-judicial meetings, so that's our meetings such as planning and licensing, would go ahead as usual during the pre-election period, and that all other meetings should take place in accordance with a decision by the monitoring officer in consultation with the chairman and vice chairman of the council cabinet or committee in question, taking into consideration the guidance which I've referred members to today. And just picking up on the Local Government Association guidance in this point, they specifically say continue to discharge normal council business, including budget consultations and determining planning applications, even if they are controversial, and that's because those elements are business as usual. We can continue to publish factual information to counteract misleading, controversial or extreme information, use relevant lead officers rather than members for reactive media releases, and use a member who is involved in an election when the council is required to respond in particular circumstances, such as in an emergency situation or where there is a genuine need for a member level response. And I think the coronavirus pandemic would give an example of where that might apply. So just picking up on some points which are specific to Cornwall Council. So as I say, we've set our notice of election to be issued on the 22nd of March, which is when the pre-election period will start. It will end at close of polls on the 6th of May. Consultations, business as usual consultations will continue, and statutory consultations, that will include budget consultation. Other consultations, additional consideration will need to be given as to whether they go ahead or not. Council meetings will continue to take place in accordance with the agreed procedure. and that relates to the council resolution of the 22nd of September. And I think we're really good at pre-planning and scheduling our meetings, taking into account the pre-election period, and that's something that we've done again for this year. In respect of code of conduct, suspend decision notices during the pre-election period, reiterating the point that council buildings can be used for party political meetings, and that members should not use council resources for political purposes. Just picking up on a point there, obviously, we are currently working within a different environment of remote meetings. So on previous occasions during pre-election periods, we have not published the webcast of that meeting until after the PERDA period. Obviously, that's something we can't do this time, because in order to comply with the remote meetings legislation, the meetings have to be live streamed. So that is something that the chair of the meetings are going to need to be more mindful of during the pre-election period. So that's just a practical point there to consider in the world of remote meetings. And then I did just want to touch on officer involvement in the elections and politically restricted posts. So officers who are not in politically restricted posts, and there are various politically restricted posts across the local authority. I think obvious ones are head of paid service, statutory chief officers, and the monitoring officer. But if you don't hold a politically restricted post and you want to assist prospective candidates and political parties, officers can do so, and that is a query we have had before from members, but they must do so in their own time and not during council work time, and council resources must also not be used. But officers who are in politically restricted posts, and I've highlighted some of them for you today, cannot be involved in that process. So there's various restrictions. They're not allowed to have an active political role in or outside of the workplace. They're unable to canvass on behalf of a political party or any person who is or seeks to be a candidate. So on this slide, I set out the guidance and the legislation which I've talked about today. So I've set out the Local Government Act 1986, which, as I say, is applicable all year, not just during the pre-election period. The current Code of Recommended Practice on Local Authority Publicity, that's the 2011 one. And then I've attached there the link to the Local Government Association Short Guide on Publicity, and that's a really good, short, useful guide. But other guidance which I have thought of today as I've been delivering, and which I can circulate to members if they would find that helpful, is that recently the Electoral Commission have updated their guidance, both in respect of to the local authority registration officer, but also to candidates or agents. So they've updated both aspects of their guidance to take into consideration specifically the coronavirus pandemic and its application to the conduct of an election. So I can forward those to members if you would find that helpful. And then I've put on the last slide where members can send any queries relating to a pre-election period. So that's to mediarelations@cornwall.gov.uk, which will go to our communications team. And any queries they're unable to deal with, they will send to key individuals and legal services, and we will then pick those up. So that concludes my presentation. I think I hand over now back to Mikey, to Councillor Ethorne Gibbons, who
Yeah, I'm just going to make a few more points, Leah,
Yeah.
if that's okay. So thank you, Leah, for taking members through that. Eternally grateful to it. Members, I just wanted to raise a few more points. So the first point I just wanted to raise is just understanding what we mean when we talk about publicity. So publicity is any communication in whatever form addressed to the public at large or the section of the public. So it's quite a broad definition in terms of publicity. And I guess I also wanted to give you some examples where we've advised against things happening, just so you're aware that that does happen and that it isn't the case that everything can continue during this time. So some examples where we've advised against is one of the portfolio holders launching the Forest for Cornwall during the pre-election period. We advised against that on the basis that we couldn't put that publicity out around that member. We also advised against events being held at New County Hall, so we've advised against those. Types of things that we haven't advised against is where third parties are organising events that we're not involved in, but council officers may need to attend. So we said where it's third parties who are organising, we have permitted officers to attend. So just to really add a bit of balance, members, to make you aware that it really is very fact specific, depending on the events and what's happening and what's taking place. As Lee's already confirmed, in terms of formal council meetings, we make sure our meeting agenda is set up appropriately, and as you've seen there, in accordance with your resolution, members, before any decision is made on members' meeting, I must consult with the chairman of the council in terms of that decision, or the chairman of the relevant committees. So hopefully members will find that useful. You'll see I've put in the chat box there, members, that we will make this available for you. So you've got this to hand, and we'll try and get this on the intranet somewhere as well, so you've got it easily accessible. But hopefully, as you can see there, if you want to make any queries, those are your directions for your queries should you have any. So thank you to Leah, and I'll hand back over to Mike. I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Mel, Leah, thank you very much indeed for that. There's a lot of detailed information there. For some of us who've been around the circuit once or twice, it's nice to be reminded of it. But clearly for new members, I would encourage everybody to look at the detail. Certainly from my perspective, the main priority is to be cautious. If you have any doubts, then take advice, but be very cautious in terms of how you take things forward, so as not to infringe some of the strong guidance that have been set out today. So I think that's all I want to say at the moment. Members, any questions, comments that you want to raise? If you could put an X in the chat box, that would be lovely. I think, Leah, Mel, you've reassured everybody.
I'd like to just check with the meeting producers, because I'm getting X's on my phone, but I'm not getting X's in my chat box. So yes, Sarah, can you just confirm it? Is that the case? Because I'm also been on the audit committee away day, so I don't know if that's members on the audit committee away day or here. So yeah, if you could confirm.
No, I can see the questions. So Mike, if you're happy, I'm happy to read out the questions to Mel and Leah. The first question we've got is from Rob Rochell. He's actually put his question in the chat box, and that is, do media events include COVID briefings, for example?
So I guess it would be how we would present those media events. So Leah's already confirmed that where we think we need a member, where there's an emergency, then we would be utilising a member, and the COVID pandemic could mean that that's the case, but we'd have to give each event consideration.
Thank you. And we have a question from Armand Toms.
Thank you, Sarah. I think Dick Cole was actually before me, if Dick wants to go first.
Oh, yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah, Councillor Cole, sorry.
Thank you, Armand. Yeah, it's weird today. My meeting chat box is completely blank, so I suppose we're all having that difficulty. I put it down really early because I accept everything we're being told. But the first thing you guys said was the elections are definitely happening on May the 6th. And I'm kind of after a bit of feedback as to what discussions are actually going on, because not playing politics or being disrespectful to anybody in this difficult time. The advice this week has changed from kids go to school on Monday, major lockdown on Tuesday. So I I'm just being blunt and saying I'm not confident that there will be elections on May the 6th. So what can you tell us about what's going on in those governmental channels that we're excluded from?
Yeah, so happy to take that question, Mike. So helpfully for me, our elections board met yesterday and we discussed this very issue. I can only say what's being confirmed to me from government and from the Electoral Commission, and at the moment we are still being told that the election is proceeding. You'll also be aware that, as Leah referenced to, the Electoral Commission is issuing guidance for us, quite a lot of guidance on how we run our election during a pandemic and the steps that we need to take in terms of that. So from my perspective as an officer, until I hear otherwise, we are proceeding with the election, and at this point in time I am not hearing any noise from government or from the Electoral Commission in relation to cancellations. Whether I can predict the future is another story, and you really don't know what's around the corner, as we've seen with the pandemic, but for this point in time all the messaging we're getting is that the election will be proceeding. And I will just make another point on that, Mike, if you don't mind. So one of the things that we are doing around the election is we are really going to be promoting postal votes. One of our priorities is to ensure that we have a safe and secure election for all involved. But one of the ways around that is that we will be pushing postal votes this year as well. So expect to be further communications around that, members, as well.
Mike, could I just say it's all very well talking about the safety of more people doing postal votes, but I can foresee difficulties when Dick Cole is wandering up someone's footpath and they're being forced back with a 2 metre wide long ranging rod. You know, it's that kind of, it's just a really difficult situation. So thank you for that.
Yes, it's quite helpful you've raised that point actually, Dick, in relation to canvas, what your role and you going out and all those sorts of things. And I just wanted to bring members' attention, and I'm happy to circulate this after today's all member brief, but the LGA is conducting a training session on the Tuesday the 26th of January at 2 p.m. and it's called Local Elections 2021, Standing for Election and Campaigning in a COVID-19 Context. So I'm happy to circulate that all to members. Just so you're aware, early on the election board, we did seek advice from the LGA around your role in campaigning, and obviously we've now got this training session in on that date, and I would recommend that members attend that as appropriate. So I do expect further guidance from the LGA about how you can canvass campaign apologies during what is a difficult time.
Could I just add a couple of points as well? So just picking up on sort of absent votes, including postal voting and proxy voting, the Electoral Commission does have a specific guidance on that, and specifically for the coronavirus pandemic period. In respect, excuse me, in respect of canvassing, I think I just reiterate Mel's points in terms of guidance that will come out around that, but obviously in respect of canvassing, it has to comply with national restrictions, and at the moment during a national lockdown that wouldn't be something that would be compliant with those restrictions. But as Mel said, we are anticipating further guidance coming out specifically on that issue. I did have a little look today to see what I could find on the internet around that point, and the only thing I could find were sort of some slides and some brief guidance from political parties. The one I found was actually from the Labour Party. So there is some stuff out there, but there's nothing as yet from any sort of recognised bodies like Mel was just talking about there in terms of general guidance on that point.
Thanks, Leah. I think the issue for many members, particularly sort of independents or smaller parties which don't have their resources, it's the inability to go around knocking on doors until the appropriate time is causing some frustration. But I think all we can do at the moment is wait and see in terms of future guidance and pronouncements from the centre. And certainly I would encourage all members to listen into the LGA and their future comments. I think that could be helpful. Now, I've got no list here of people who've asked questions. I don't know, Sarah, if you've got anybody else down there. If you have,
yeah. The next questioner is Councillor Toms. Bring you back in, Councillor Toms.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Mike. Yes, I totally agree with the bit that Mike's just said about the independent members having less issues. As you know, Mel, I wrote to you after writing to the Electoral Commission about getting voter lists for our wards, and they said that you should be going to us as well because it was just the political parties. Throughout the speech that Leah has just made, it's about political parties, and we have a great part of this, of Cornwall, if you like, is that it's got a good number of independent people that stand for election. I think that we will be penalised with, with the situation as it currently is. What you don't know is that I wrote to the Electoral Commission after the last election and said Cornwall voted, and I gave them a number of votes that were cast for independence, and yet the BBC, ITV and all the other media channels, Radio Cornwall and everybody else totally neglected the independent voice, especially in Cornwall and across the country, because don't forget, we are not that far from the Liberal Democrat number of independent councillors throughout the country. So we're quite a large part, and they never got a voice at all. And good luck with the mail-in voting, because in America, that is the problem that they've got over there, is they use mass mail-in voting, and it opens it up to corruption. And I hope we have a good and proper system in place to make sure that it is fair, because I know there have been allegations and proven allegations within this country that mail-in ballots have been tampered with or used in an improper way. I believe there was some back in when we had our last elections in 2017, not in this area, but in London especially. So those are my concerns, that it seems okay for political parties, but not the independent that stands for his local or her local community. Thank you.
Thanks, Armand, for that. Was there a specific question you wanted to raise, or just make those observations, which I think are very, very sound?
And
my observation is that it's not fair for the local independent, where it's all we've talked about is political parties. And to me, if the council wants to be fair and fair, it should talk about independent people as well. And Dick's right, I want to walk up everybody's door to make sure that they know who I am, and get their vote. Whereas a political party have got the wherewithal of mass money to be able to mail out to everybody, whereas I couldn't afford to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Armand.
Hi, can I just, I do want to respond, because I just want to give members assurance around the safety and secureness of an election, given the comments made around the postal points. And I also note the comments about the independent members, and clearly that's something that you can take a political line on higher up the, in government. But just in terms of the safety and security, I just do need to be clear that we will be complying with all the Electoral Commission guidance in terms of how we run and how that election is taken forward. I also think it's probably just worth me raising with members an issue that we are raising with government, is about this election will cost more. Because we are running the election during a pandemic, so it will cost more because of the additional safety measures that we will require to be having in place. So I think I missed that point earlier, Mike. Apologies, I just wanted to raise those 2 points.
Thanks, Mel. I think it might be helpful for members to get the most up-to-date position. You did mention earlier, Leah, the date of the LGA briefing. Could you just mention that again so all members have got it? So if they are interested to get the most up-to-date situation, they can dial into that, please.
Yeah, so and I'll make sure I circulate it afterwards as well, Mike. So it's Tuesday the 26th of January at 2 p.m.
Thanks very much, Mel. That's very helpful. Right, I think it's over to you, Sarah, if you've got the list of people who want to raise some questions.
Yeah, we've got Councillor Ellenbrook next.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, I'm another one where my box isn't working, so I haven't got a clue. Couple of questions, really. Would neighbourhood development plan consultations and what have you still be allowed to go ahead is question number one. And question number two, am I right in assuming that these rules and regulations also apply to town and parish councils? I think I know the answer to that, which is yes. So my question is, what are we doing as the principal authority to actually share all this information with the town and parish councils? Because that may be an area where prospective candidates may inadvertently make mistakes if they don't have all this information. So thank you.
Mel, could I just address the town and parish council point first? So in respect of the town and parish councils, yes, you're correct. The pre-election period restrictions do also apply to them. Something has actually come through to me this week regarding that, and I have been asked to give some advice to town and parish councils on that issue, and I will be doing that very shortly.
Thanks, Leah. And just on the neighbourhood development plan referendum, yes, those will be going ahead at the election. We're going to have a busy time, councillors.
Yeah, I mean, our neighbourhood plan has been put on hold a bit because of COVID, the one I'm personally involved with, but I do know that there are others that are coming up to referendum that probably really need to go ahead. And on the question of the town and parish councils, would it be useful, and I'm just asking the question, whether this presentation, this excellent presentation that you've just done, is actually circulated to all town and parish councils? That may make it easier for everybody.
Yeah, Leah's the one that did the work, but I'm happy with that.
Yeah, also happy with that.
Good, yeah, I think that would be very helpful, so everybody then is off the same hymn sheet and does understand what's going on. Sarah, I don't know if you've also picked up, we've got a couple of hands up, one from Paul Wills and also Mike McLennan.
Yes, I can see those. I'm going to deal with Sue James first, and then we can bring in one of the hands up, Mike.
Okay, thanks, Sarah.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think Purdah is going to be particularly difficult given that we're in a global pandemic, because I think, you know, that whole subject is going to be very difficult in terms of balancing what we need to get out there and what could be interpreted as politically sensitive. So, you know, I think inadvertently people could make errors, and I don't envy officers on the advice, but that's a comment rather than a question. Rumours are rife, you know, as to whether it's definitely going ahead in May or whether there's question marks and a U-turn might happen, but I know you can't predict that. Another rumour I've heard, and I don't know whether anyone can give any light on this. I mean, I did hear that the government were ruling out a postal vote only, but that there was suggestion that polling, actually going and putting your cross in a box, might be over 2 days. So I didn't know whether there's any evidence of credence to that. And I also wanted clarification whether I've understood you right, that the notice of this election going ahead in May could go out is the 29th of March. So therefore, if you like, if the lockdown continues into March and there's therefore not a definite fire the gun, that it would be up until the 29th of March that gun could still be fired. So if you like, it would be up until the 28th that the government could change its mind and call it off.
Leah, Mel, who would like to respond to that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Apologies, I was just on meeting. So a couple of points from me. So I've heard nothing officially or rumour or otherwise in relation to extending the days of polling day to 2 days. So I haven't heard that through any formal routes. In terms of kind of the final cut-off date, what we're actually doing is a piece of work that we will be sharing with the Electoral Commission around when is this starting to cost serious money and have serious implications. So we are doing that piece of work through the Elections Board, and we will be sharing our thoughts with the Electoral Commission in relation to that. They haven't asked for it, but we will be sharing that through with the Electoral Commission.
Right, thanks, Mel. Right, Sarah, who's next?
Yeah, we'll bring one of our hands up, members. The first hand I can see there is Councillor Wills.
Thank you very much. This week in Parliament, the question was raised actually about local elections during the COVID-19 lockdown debate, to which the Prime Minister, I believe, replied, in fact, I know what he replied because I watched it, that elections are enshrined in law, but this is under review as regards to local elections. So I think we are absolutely right in going ahead and letting people know what the rules are regarding PERDA should that election be called. My question is quite a simple one. When the election is called, from that date, do we cease being councillors from that date, like members of Parliament cease being members of Parliament, or are we still councillors up until the election result, and then we know if we've been re-elected or not, as the case may be? So that's really all I want to know.
Mel, do you want to, or do you want me to respond to that?
I'm quite happy either way, Leah. So my view is that you continue to remain councillors up until the date of the close of poll. In terms of just coming back to the will it, won't it, the election point, probably another point I'd make is that in the legislation that came out around the coronavirus and the restrictions that are now in place, there is an explicit exclusion in there in relation to elections. So just to make members aware that where it's talked about what can and can't happen, they've excluded elections from that in the existing legislation that's in place in relation to this lockdown. So just wanted to make you aware. But yes, you are still a member until close of poll, Councillor Wills.
Thank you. Just one very quick follow-up question, if I may. When can we start putting out our leaflets? Is there a time limit? Can you not put them out before PERDA? Can you put them out, or, you know, once the election has been called? What is there a time limit to when you can put them out?
No, there is no time limit. You could be doing that now if you so wished.
Too cold, but thank you very much, Leah.
Thanks, Paul. Keep you busy. All right, Sarah, the next questioner, please.
Yeah, that's Councillor Nicholas.
Hi there, thank you. Yeah, it was a really good presentation and thanks for that, but a couple of issues that I just wanted some clarification on. About the NDP, if we're pushing for people to do postal votes, how is the council going to pay for or actually implement postal votes for NDPs, for those that are going to referenda? And then the other one really was about how, and it is about the costings, because years ago parish and town councils weren't having to pay recharges on the election, which they do now. And if this is all going to cost more, what are you going to do, or how are we going to deal with parishes who quite frankly won't have the finance to pay for it?
Yeah, so I'll start with your first point, if that's okay, Sue, and then come back to the cost. So just in terms of the voting and neighbourhood development plan, all methods, as far as we're concerned, all methods of voting will be available for individuals, and I'll perhaps explore further on that postal voting point. In terms of the cost, so what we've done as an elections team is we every year, and you might not have noticed it when you sign off the budget, but it is in there, we put a small amount in reserve to cover us for our elections. We have built a budget this year that we think incorporates kind of that risk factor of the pandemic, but we are exploring whether we can seek that additional funding either through existing COVID funding that we have, and I say that with a caution because I haven't raised this with the Section 151, so either existing funding or whether we seek additional funding from government. So I would hope, Sue, that that wouldn't fall upon the parish councils in terms of an increase in costs.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
Right, so Sarah, the next one, please, in terms of questions. I see in terms of hands up, we've got 3 there. We'll take those as appropriate. But Sarah, who's next?
Yes, Councillor Jenkins next.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thank you for the reminder of everything. It's really useful. Sort of following on from Councillor Wills, it's very obvious that there will be councillor work going on during the election campaign. I mean, it has been in every other election, and I think even more so now, and even more so with electronic communications rather than face-to-face. So can we be assured that all the electronic connections will be in place and no plugs will be pulled at any point when we're trying to deal with things? I know when we had the last election, what happened was that that for those of us who were re-elected, we went back into a completely new email system and had to recover all our files on ongoing constituency work, etc. Can we have a little bit more of an understanding about how the councillor's job works, and it doesn't just stop because there's an election going on? Yeah, and in relation to the accessing the internet and the hardware, I probably know what your answer is, but yeah, at the moment I access all my emails through my council hardware. You know, so theoretically that's using council resources, but my personal emails, I just use the same interface to access. Are you going to tell me I've got to go out and buy another laptop?
No. Mel?
So, yeah, so just picking up on the first one, so the point around things stopping when an election is going ahead, certainly from my memory of the last one, that wasn't the case. I think we had cabinet the week before, constitution, and I had about 3 or 4 committees going on before the last snap election that we had. So no, it won't be. But the only thing I will say with a caveat around that, Loveday, because I think I need to be honest, is that I do pull 1,800 staff from across the organisation to support me in delivering the election. So although I would like to say that things will continue as is, there obviously is an impact because we are utilising resources across the organisation, and it won't surprise you to know that I will be saying I need those people to be prioritising the election, and it comes back to the age-old thing, doesn't it, in a council where it's what do you prioritise and when sort of thing. So so I would say it with that caveat. In terms of the usage of the laptop, I have no issue using your personal email on that laptop to support you in your role.
Right, thanks, Mel. That's very helpful, very reassuring. Right, Sarah, the next one. I know we've got, I think, 4 members with hands up, so leave it to you to see who's next.
We'll bring in Councillor Mckenna next, Mike.
Lovely.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, it's good afternoon now, sorry. Thank you for everybody's time this morning. And I think Loveday helped me with some of my questions just now. For those who are professional politicians in the council, and I've been doing it for 4 years and noticed some of the tricks, etc. And I don't believe, from training in my career, you don't knock the opposition. You never do that in life. But if I'm unhappy with comments being put out that I've got by opposition people, what can I do about it?
So if you're unhappy, I suggest you would raise that with me as the monitoring officer, or of course, if you think there's been a breach of any of the rules, you could raise that with the Electoral Commission. But I suggest if you've got any concerns that you raise that with myself.
Okay, thank you then. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Mel. Sarah, next one on the list, please.
Yeah, Councillor Kirkham.
Jane.
Hello, sorry about that. I've been a bit in and out, so I apologise if I've missed the answer to this question. It was really, I heard somebody mention leaflets and campaigning earlier. I was going to ask what the rules are for campaigning within a lockdown, because I thought we wouldn't be able to certainly do leafleting because you're only supposed to go out for certain prescribed circumstances. So I wondered about campaigning in the lockdown? Do we have any guidelines on that?
So I think, Jane, the best advice I can give is there's an LGA seminar on the 26th of January at 2 o'clock, and it is around standing for election and campaign in the COVID-19 context. So Sarah's going to circulate that round. She may have already put it in the chat box.
Sounds like that's already been covered then.
So I would have a look at that. But yeah, you do need to comply with the national guidelines at the moment, but hopefully the LGA will give more clarity.
Lovely, thank you.
Yes, could I just come in there as well, because I did give a previous response in terms of was there a time limit on which you could do leafleting, etc. When I gave that response, that was in respect of electoral restrictions for so doing, but obviously if you were going to do anything at the moment, it would need to comply with the national lockdown restrictions.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Right, next one, please. I'm conscious, members, that time is moving on. We were scheduled to finish at 1. I'm happy for it to go on a little bit beyond that, but I do have another commitment shortly. But anyway, Sarah, who's next on the list, please?
Yeah. Councillor Rushworth, Mike.
Thank you. Steve.
Thank you, Sarah. Actually, James already asked one of my 2 questions. The second question is, for clarity, in the first administration, which I was in, I obviously wasn't selected for the second one, but from my recollection, we were still members, councillors, for a couple of days afterwards while the transition took place, where you said it, I think Liz said that it was straight after the election, but I think, isn't there a couple of day overlap where obviously people picking up equipment and various things? So that was my second question, the legal clarity.
Yeah, so I believed it to be close the poll, but I will just double check that for you, Councillor Rushworth, just to make sure that definitely is the case, but that's what I understood it to be.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Stephen, certainly from my perspective, that's always been my understanding. But I suspect in the past there's been a degree of flexibility, as you rightly say, in terms of returning iPads and etc. But yeah, Mel's given you an answer and she will double check that for you.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, next please, Sarah.
Yes, Mike, just before I announce the next one, this will be sending members clear details about the transition period from the one authority to the other. So there will be lots of information coming out to members prior to the election. Our next speaker is Councillor Mckenna.
Sarah, thank you. It picks up on what was said a few minutes ago, but I just want to clarify, when will candidates know the individual limits they have for electoral spending? Because it'll vary according to ward size, division size and numbers, I'm sure. So at what point will we be clear if we are planning on standing? And secondly, at what point do leaflets sent out start to constitute a call on those expenses? So in other words, can, let's say for the sake of argument, parties with lots of resources sends out 3 or 4 leaflets before that electoral expense thing kicks in, even if they are overt about they are standing and these are the issues and those sorts of things. So 2 questions. Thank you.
Yes, so happy to answer those. So we have the figures, the overall figures at the moment. So the order came in on the 22nd December 2020, which has given us those figures. And effectively those, you'll be eligible to those financial support, and we will have those detailed figures following the notice of election on the 22nd of March. So each candidate will then be able to calculate their maximum spending limit. So the relevant date is the 22nd of March. In terms of whether anything before applies, my view would be that it doesn't, but again, I'm happy to double check that, but it wouldn't seem appropriate to apply before the publication date of the 22nd of March.
That's fine, thank you. I just wanted to clarify, that's fine. Thank you.
I just wanted to add there as well that the guidance that I referred to from the Electoral Commission that has just recently been updated does cover all of those points, both in respect of timetable and the date of when the spend limitations kick in. So that is all covered in that guidance as well that I will be sharing with you.
Okay, very quick follow-up, Mike. Bearing in mind the needs to plan, particularly if one is independent and self-reliant in terms of printing and stuff, is there any chance that the amounts could be released in advance of the call on the election, bearing in mind they're unlikely to change? So, because clearly some of these things take time.
We can release the information that we have in the regulations, so that gives us the amount per electoral area. So we can release what we've got in the regulations at this stage.
That'll be helpful, thank you.
Thanks, Mel. I think that would be helpful. Yes, please. Right, Sarah, next one, please.
Yeah, that's Councillor Mitchell, Andrew Mitchell.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Just for information, unless it has changed, win or lose on the election day, we remain councillors for 3 days after that to allow things to be tidied up. So I just wanted to say, you know, if you can come up with a magical and mystical name like Purda, it's just the payday for lawyers. My understanding is Purda prevents me from doing nothing. If I wish to put comms out saying, vote for me or re-elect me and I will make day night and night day, I can do. All the implications are on what the council can and can't do, and whether it's acknowledged or in relation to a candidate which it seems to be favouring. So that's my view I've taken for the last 27 years, and Mel hasn't had to ring me up and tell me off yet. So that's one thing. I am a little concerned. I have absolute complete faith in our election process, whether it was 100% postal or 100% going to the poll. But it does concern me because we've all now got divisions which are half the size again. And if we do promote, or if the government says it's all postal, then they get sent out 2, possibly 3 weeks before polling day. Now for us too, if we are allowed to canvass and put leaflets out, to try and do, you know, 5,000 odd properties, just if we promoted postals, it's just completely unfair on all candidates, but probably particularly independents. So if we are to do that, can we delay the date that postals votes get sent out, or is that set in law? Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Mel, please.
Yeah, so I don't know if you wanted a response on the Purda point, but if you do, like Leah coming on the Purda point,
Yeah,
thanks for the.
I'm more than happy to pay for your. I mean, to take your advice, Mel. Thanks.
Thanks for the clarification on members, and apologies if I got that wrong around that 3 days, but I will get that confirmed in writing to everybody. So I'll hand over to Leah for the Purda point, and then I'll come back in on the election side.
And I wasn't going to respond on the Purda point, but there was not much I disagreed with Councillor Mitchell on his observations.
Yeah,
on
I just
Purda.
wanted you to say that and not me.
I wanted to pick up just, I mean, this will depend on if things change regarding postal votes, but at the moment, the dates set for sending out postal votes, etc., are all set and they are in the Electoral Commission timetable. I don't know if Mel's got any further information on that point, but the other point I just wanted to come back on is on the term of office for councillors. So in the Local Government Act 1972, it is you remain a councillor until the 4th day after the elections, and that's when you retire, and that's when the new councillors come into post. So I just wanted to reiterate that point. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Leah, appreciated. So just in terms of the point around 100% postal, so Leah's confirmed the set in legislation, but I do need to make the point now that if we were told it was 100% postal, that would be a significant challenge, and we would need to do a review about that, whether that was deliverable from an operational perspective as well. So it is set in the timetable, but we would definitely need to consider whether we were still capable of delivering an election within the timescales set at the moment.
Yeah. Thanks, Mel. That's very helpful. Right, Sarah, any more? Again, I'm conscious, members, of time. Sarah.
This is the last request that we've got, and it's Councillor German.
Saving the best to last, is this right? Okay. Julian.
Julian.
I'll just check him on the call. He might have left the call. 1 second.
We've put him off, Mike.
It's all the members' fault, is it not?
He's standing down, actually.
Yeah, sadly, Mike, it looks as if he's had to leave the call, so we've finished.
I'm not surprised, because I think there is a cabinet briefing shortly, to which I really must attend along with Andrew. Members, I hope you found that useful today. The detail behind what's said will be going out to all members. As ever, if any of you have further questions, please direct them to Mel or Leah, who I'm sure will be very happy to respond to those. Can I thank both Leah and Mel, and indeed Sarah, for commenting and arranging today's presentations. I think it's very helpful, and I'll say cheerio to you all now, and we'll move on.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.